Bum 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 bum. Bam. Hey, I'm Jake from the Hobby Desk. I joined my local game store's Path to Glory campaign. Grab yourself a cup of something nice and let's see how it's going. Alright, this is the second report on the campaign that I've done so far. If you'd like to see the first, the link is in the description. As a reminder, I'll give you an update on my army, report on the battles from this month, and tell you about my hobby progress and plans for next month. So, the tale thus far. Ooh. Ysir winced as his gaze met the torchlight. He always hated being underground. I have a message for St. Ansel. The torchbearer motioned him to follow. The descent was interrupted by a small procession. Ysir tugged at the rings on his cuff. These pilgrims grow ever more quiet and superstitious. His guide made no reply. They passed through the incense smoke trailing behind the procession and continued downward. The torchbearer stopped outside the entrance to a large chamber. He would go no further. Ysir nodded his thanks and pressed on. A dour presence swallowed him as he entered the chamber. It was lit solely by two great lanterns that blazed like eyes, burning the hope from those who stood before them. At the center of the room rested a dais. The Knight Relector knelt there motionless before a grand sarcophagus. Ysir paused for a moment, struck by worry for his master. He bit his tongue. Since the saint's last defeat, it seemed that he preferred the company of the dead, tending to his fallen lord, never losing faith that his tomb would one day become his throne room. High Martyr, he lifted his head from his prayer. Speak your mind. A small company of Vindictors have arrived from Excelsius. They are led by a man named Tubal Cair, last of his name. They bring word of cataphract reinforcements. They ride to us as we speak. The old priest rose, his back to the attendant. And what of the Omen's Eye? The forward company has found it. They report that the keep lies somewhere to the northeast, and it appears to hold some power of a portent. But the Dwarden have made camp there. What would you have us do? So perhaps it was here. If one made to raise the sun, do you think it possible to overtake it? I think not, sir. Perhaps. But perhaps not, if one starts running before the sun is risen. His master turned and met his gaze, and then looked towards the surface. Summon the court. We will collect the forward company and take the keep. Have the footmen join us. Let's test their mettle. We march on the hour. Here is my army so far. Currently, I have 750 points. They are Scions of the Storm, and for subfaction, I've chosen the Tenants of the Gladiatorium. The two tenants that I have chosen are Obliterating Storm from the Tenants of the Hammer, which give my units a +1 to hit if they've made a charge on the same turn, and Swift Strikers from the Tenants of Tempest, which adds 1 to run and charge rolls for all of my units. My current quest is search for the artifact, looking for the Amulet of Destiny. I'm excited to use this to protect my warlord a little bit more. I have a basic stronghold, the Barrow Mound, which has 1 barracks, and now I have 2 territories, the Time-Worn Ruin and the Omen's Eye, which are a small settlement and old keep, respectively. Currently in my vault, I have a bonus prayer, Translocation, which was the result of a quest. I have a Vanguard Battalion, and my triumph is Bloodthirsty. My warlord is a Knight Relector named St. Ansel. For his command trait, he has Skilled Leader, and he has an artifact of power, the Mirror Shield. I did end up exchanging the Arcane Tome for the Mirror Shield. I find that my warlord is often in melee, and I'd like for him to have just a little bit of protection from ranged attacks. And for his prayer, I chose Bless Weapons. Next is the Court, a group of secretors that's been reinforced, led by Capitana Santilli. They have a veteran ability now called Total Commitment. This lets the unit fight as if they had charged, which combines with my earlier ability, giving them +1 to hit. They are Renown 8. So far, this unit has been one of the biggest threats on the board, which unfortunately has also made them one of the biggest targets. I found myself favoring the etheric channeling on their shields for just a little bit better of defense. Next is the forward company, my group of vigilers led by Ishka. Their veteran ability is lightning charged bolts. When they shoot, this ability allows them once per battle to score a mortal wound whenever they have an unmodified roll of a 6 on a wound roll, in addition to any other damage they would inflict. They are currently renowned 6. This might be my favorite unit so far. I usually start them out in Azir and then drop them where they're most needed, and they usually unleash a good amount of damage, and then start chasing down and cleaning up other units on the field. Following them are my Cloud Piercers. This is a unit of Castigators led by Caster. They have a veteran ability of lightning charged bolts. They are renowned 5. This is the cheapest unit in my army, which is nice, but I kind of wish that I had more bodies. I think I'll be benching them until I have a little bit more infantry to protect them. Finally is the Remnant. This is my group of Vindictors led by Tubal Cair, last of his name. Their veteran ability is Total Commitment, and they are renowned 5. I love this unit's 3-up save, and the ability to score a mortal wound on an unmodified hit roll of 6 is really nice. Dun, dun. And now for the battles. I was able to get 2 battles in this month, one against my buddy Sean and one against my new buddy Dennis. So for this battle, we played the battle plan Hold or Die. I chose the Custodians and Sean chose the Invaders. How this plan works is that Sean separates his army into 2 groups, the Vanguard and the Reinforcements. The Vanguard starts play in that Invaders territory, and the Reinforcements come in on a later turn. Victory for either side is dependent on the Invaders' Vanguard or General's survival. So as I said before, my opponent for this game was my buddy Sean, who brought his Cities of Sigmar Dwarves. The Lost Expedition. Man, I love this army. Sean and I both started in the Warcry narrative, and our armies have had a great back and forth rivalry. Our games usually ended with me taking the loss and Sean having to make a fistful of injury rolls. Anyways, I think Sean did a great job on his army. I love the kind of cold steel look of a lot of his troops, and it's hard to see here, but Sean does actually a great job of doing gem work. He also has a great use of little plinths for his elite units. For deployment, Sean's Vanguard was led by his Rune Lord, Gargor Stormkin, leading a group of Ironbreakers, the Sorrowful Hearts, and some Longbeards, those who remember. He grouped up in one of the corners of the dilapidated keep. For my deployment, on the far edge, St. Ansel held a court. On the left side, I set up my Cloud Piercers, backed up by my freshly formed group of Vindictors. Finally, my Vigilers started in Azir. Sean chose to go first, and at the end of his movement phase, his reinforcements arrived. It seems that Sean's Warden King, Alagrak Stormkin, decided to hide his reinforcements behind this small hill. With a battle cry, he jumped over the hill and charged my Vindictors, as the Grudge Hammers made way to pile into my Warlord and sandwich in my Sequitors. His Iron Drakes, the Bridge Burners, hopped out of cover and made ready to rain down a volley, and the Longbeards charged the Castigators and Vindictors. The Castigators, underestimating the dwarves' movement, were far too close to avoid the charge. Their hastily made cover fire was not enough to deter them. 2 great melees began on the far side and left side of the table. St. Ansel was struck down, and his Sequitors were quick to follow, not slow to take many dwarves with them from their thunderous departure. The Vigilers of the forward company arrived just as the Vindictors finished off the Longbeards. They fired bolts of guiding light into the Iron Drakes and Alagrak. They pursued and cut down most of the Iron Drakes, and the Vindictors were able to take down Alagrak. Garagor took the remaining Iron Breakers to attempt to counterattack to avenge his kin, but they were met by the ends of the Vindictor spears. By the time the Hammerers made it across the field, the battle had ended. The last of the dwarves fled, with the forward company in pursuit, leaving the Vindictors the lone group on the battlefield. Surveying the ruin, their leader, Tubal Cair, claimed the site for Sigmar and named his contingent the Remnant. Well, alright. First major victory. My Vindictors were the most valuable unit on the field. I believe they took out all 3 of the invader squads. And I think having my Vigilers come out of Azir at any time was really helpful for positioning and making sure that I could tie up loose ends. Alright, Battle 2. This game I was playing against Dennis and his Night Haunt, the Emerald Blade. I really liked his Grimghast Reapers. Paint job was cool, and he actually left the heads off the models, which gave them a very classic Ghost feel. This battle, we played Show of Strength. Super simple. Destroy more enemies than your opponent. For deployment, I clumped up almost all of my units right on my table edge. I put my Sequitors around my Warlord as kind of a bubble, having my Vindictors set up a little bit to the left and my Castigators behind me. And finally, I put my Vigilers in Azir. Dennis had his Guardian of Souls and both units of his Grimghast Reapers, known as the Defiler's Wrath, haunt terrain. And he set up his Warlord, a Knight of Shrouds named Angmar the Defiler, as well as his Spirit Host, the Host of Sorrows, on his table edge. Dennis took first turn, and charged both his war leader and spirit host towards my army. In response, I foolishly marched my units into his sudden but inevitable trap, exposing what I can only describe as my unit's posthumous posteriors. Dennis took the next turn, and the haunt began. Turns out all surrounding pieces of terrain were haunted, so naturally the ghosts woke up and charged, screaming and yelling into all of my units. After this shrieking and devastating charge, this was all that was left. Before, after. Before, after. My one saving grace is that I kept rolling 6s on my Blaze of Glory rolls. Turns out St. Ansel and his court are better at killing ghosts by dying instead of using their hammers. On my turn, the forward company arrived to an absolute mess. Along with the remnant and poor, sweet little caster, they tried as they might, but ultimately failed to hem the tide of ghosts. All of my forces were wiped out, winning Dennis a major victory. Congrats, bro. I thought that grouping up my units would provide a better defensive, instead it was a much easier target. It seems that the Night Haunt do really well off of a charge, and providing them so many targets only helped them even more. When I play against Night Haunt in the future, I plan to spread out my formations and play around terrain. At higher point values, I wonder if my Stromcast will be able to weather a Night Haunt charge. I guess we'll find out. Again, good game, Dennis. Wow. This month, we're moving to 1,000 points. Up until now, I've only added to my army in small amounts so that I can get a solid grip on my army's rules and the core rules. I want to try out some new units and strategies, so I intend to add more than 250 points to my army as I get the glory, and change up my list each battle. The first units I will be adding are a Lord Aquiller and Stormstrike Chariot. I've already recruited them, and both are going in my list for my next battle. I'm excited to add the Lord Aquiller, at least for the sake of having another hero. My Warlord got taken out in my last game with Sean, and every turn I missed those heroic actions. Not again. I also just like this model. I love kit bashing, and almost every model in my army has at least one little change to it. But for this model, I really went to town. I really liked the theme of the first wave Stormcast when it came to the Vanguard, hardened warrior scouts and explorers, but I think the design suffered from the giant shoulder pads and chunky proportions of the first line. So I gave my model an Annihilator chest, and even though I don't usually like the animal armor bits, I gave him a Vigilar Eagle's shoulder and Vigilar head, which came while I was making this video, so that explains my Lord Aquiller's Sleepy Hollow look in some of these pictures. I am looking forward to having a Lord in my list. Some of the Stormcast abilities have a larger radius if you're using a Lord, and who knows, if I like him too much, the good St. Ansel might relinquish his warlordship to the Aquiller. Next is the Stormstrike Chariot. This model struck two big notes for me: my love of ancient and medieval historical warfare, and birds. And when I looked at its war scroll and the price my local game store had it at, I picked it up immediately. I'm looking forward to this model riding down on a bolt of lightning, charging a group of utterly unprepared chaff and obliterating it. Or more realistically, failing a charge roll and getting blown off the table. I'm also excited to paint this model. Not only does this guy have a huge base, which I am definitely prepared to finish, but I am thrilled to paint more birds. This brings up another yet unknown theme of my army. All of the various bird creatures are painted like real birds I've seen around my home. I saw Alex from all 52 of the miniatures paint his Paladors like this, and I thought, well, that is exactly what I'm going to do too. Link to his video below. I was so excited to paint these guys that I started right after taking these pictures. Here's where they are now. Still much work to be done, but I figured an update was warranted. I also got my grubby little mitts on a Draconith kit, and made a Fulminator and Lord Celestin on Dracoth. This is a neat kit. When I was making the Fulminator, I started making a story for him and some background that I'm excited about. Perhaps I'll include it in my next report. I gave him some cool bits and basing. I imagine him as a knight quester who grew to great individual fame as a proud and boisterous errant knight. And the Lord Celestin is a stoic and faithful friend from when they served together in the Guard, who has now risen to high command and station. The Lord Celestin needs some more bits and basing, but I gave him an Annihilator head, which gave him a stern look. I might give him a bigger hill to stand on for a little bit more presence. Finally, I have my Manhunters, a group of vanquishers, of which some of the members showed up in the Warcry narrative. Video in progress. My army has a few homages to my Scottish heritage, so when I found a group of knights with huge swords and flowing waist robes, I saw an opportunity. I am pumped and a little nervous to paint more plaids, but I do enjoy the personality of this trophy-wearing unit. It'll be fun. I have some work to do on my current army. Most of my models' bases still need to be painted, although all of them have now gotten a thick dark wash. There are also a couple more touch-ups that I'll knock out on my next painting session. My Sequitors have a few trinkets like bells and chains, and I'll hit my Vindictors armor trim and shields with bronze. So that's the plan at the moment. As you can see, got a few things in the works. I've been having a lot of fun getting used to Age of Sigmar and playing in the bigger games. Things are starting to heat up in the campaign, and man, am I ready to cook. I'll check in with you next month and tell you about everything that's happened. Until then, I'm Jake from the Hobby Desk. See you around.